So questions? Who wants to go first? Let's see. Yeah, you. Also, yeah, that's good.
Sort of wondering from a journalistic perspective that we have such a linear presentation of knowledge and this ambition for sort of sharing collective debates about things. I'm just wondering if you look at any interfaces transcribing some of this stuff and communicating it so that normal people can relate to that knowledge in some way as well.
Who's that question directed to? Ben, okay.
About the node and link
Can we repeat
graphs.
the question, Ben? Go ahead.
I believe he was asking about the graphs of nodes and links, which are a depiction of the knowledge inside the Novamente system, and he's pointing out that this is not such an explanatory way of looking at the knowledge inside an AI system, and is there another way to represent this knowledge that would be more amenable to the non-technical person to understand?
Well, just, if that's how the AI is seeing it, does it translate?
It's not, okay, let me try to clarify the intent of those diagrams. So, I mean, the AI system has knowledge represented as a bunch of software objects internally, and I actually tend to view them on the command line by a long string of text printed out. However, you can also feed them into graph visualization tools to make pictures to look at. The actual only point of those pictures is to show to non-technical people, because those of us working on the project would rather look at that command line output. Now, is it possible to take the knowledge inside an AI system's mind and make it more amenable to viewing? That's a very hard problem. I mean, to take the knowledge inside my own mind and make it amenable to viewing is hard. I think we're pretty much flat out just trying to make a thinking machine within the next 5 or 10 years, and trying to work out the most beautiful way to visualize what happens in its mind is sort of another separate, difficult problem, which I haven't thought about that much.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, this is also for Ben. Could you describe, maybe at a very high level, how your theory of AGI is similar to Jeff Hawkins?
It's not. Yeah, sure. Jeff Hawkins, he articulates two things in his book on intelligence, which I enjoyed reading. One is a general framework of intelligence in terms of memory and prediction. And I think that general framework is substantially correct. My own general framework on intelligence, which I talked about in my book, The Hidden Pattern, is about intelligence as pattern recognition. And memory and prediction is basically about pattern recognition, remembering the patterns you've seen and predicting the future by guessing which patterns are going to be extrapolated into the future. So on the philosophical level, I think he's right on. What he's actually doing with software right now is making a pattern recognition system, which is a sort of combination of a pyramidal neural net architecture with a sort of Bayes net learning algorithm. And it's a very nice pattern recognition system. It has some fairly loose similarities to parts of the human visual cortex. I don't personally see it as being a viable overall AGI architecture. Like, it doesn't deal with motor control, language learning, reasoning, and long and short-term memory and their interaction, all sorts of other things. Now, what Jeff would probably say, and what he did say when I dialogued with him on this is, yes, but once you crack the pattern recognition problem with the hierarchical pattern recognition network, then you can get all these other things to work by applying similar principles. And I don't quite believe that. So I guess I've taken more of a top-down approach in terms of making an overall cognitive architecture based on cognitive psychology, and then really spending many years trying to think through how you would achieve everything the human mind does, respecting the qualitative differences between the different cognitive, perceptual, and motoric faculties we have. He's more starting with visual perception, figures you wrap that up, then extrapolate from that to the other things within the overall philosophical framework of memory and prediction.
Okay. Eliezer, do you have a question for Paul or Neil?
Yeah, here. For Paul, actually.
Paul, okay.
Yeah, Tyler here too.
So you mentioned that you didn't want to be any god's pet, a sentiment of which I myself am in agreement. I wouldn't like to be a pet either. but really leave it up to us nerds to achieve a possibility that is better than that if you can specify it. So here's another evil probe that I often use, which is if you could live in any world you wanted, unrestrained by even physics, but the rules had to be the same for everyone. So you could say, I want to live in Tolkien's Middle-earth, but you can't say, I'm Frodo. You might end up as an orc. So if you could live anywhere you wanted, where would you live?
I'm going to give you a very disappointing answer because I actually answered that question for myself last night. I was driving home, and the Golden Gate Bridge was off in the distance, and the sky was beautiful, and the sun was setting, and I thought, there is not any place better than right here and right now. You can beat me up over a drink.
Yeah, David.
Yeah, Paul, the way you framed the beautiful poem makes it look like as if the bridge to be built is between nerds and humanists. And you know, there are initiatives like edge.org that try to build the third culture, bridging this. I would posit, and I would like you to comment, that there is a more important bridge that we have to find a way to build between those of us who are proud of knowledge and those instead who are proud of their ignorance. And especially in positions of power, this is more dangerous, obscurantism, from a Faustian danger and a Faustian fear than not our position of humble pride. So what do you think?
I think you have a great observation there, and the issue you've noted, I think, is very much a live issue at the moment. I should also add, I don't see it as a two cultures problem between, the first part, we made the observation about the technical folks and writers. I don't see that as a two cultures problem. There is a continuum. Some of my closest computer science friends are actually really good novelists, David Brin and others, so I don't think it's too much of an issue there. But you absolutely put up the right point, this battle between knowledge and ignorance. And all I can say to add to it is, I think it's a question of equity. The people who are saying that they'd rather not know and don't want more knowledge are possibly people who perceive that knowledge hasn't been very good to them in the last 100 years. And I don't mean they're necessarily poor. There are a lot of know-nothings in Washington right now as well. So very good observation. I think it stands on its own 2 feet.
I have a question for you, Neil. Okay, so I take it that you think there's a non-negligible probability that we'll have advanced AI within our lifetimes?
Correct.
Okay, so what do you think we should be doing about that? I mean, what are our priorities? Since that's the case, and since you probably think that the potential consequences could be large, swinging in either direction.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think one of the things that we have to do is convene organizations and meetings like this where people can discuss the consequences. And another thing I think we ought to do is experiment in relatively sandboxed environments, constrained VR environments, and see how the systems behave that we're building and test them before we release them. I think that's critically important. The other thing we need to do is to be able to detect systems that other people release where they may not have tested them as carefully, or they may have a malicious intent. So I think all those things are important things to do.
Right. Okay. Yep.
I'd appreciate each of your opinions on this. Do you guys realistically think that apoptosis or pre-programmed cell death could realistically be inhibited within my generation? Because everywhere I go, people think I'm totally crazy.
Anybody want to start on that?
Don't start with me, man.
I think that it's certainly possible. It really depends on whether we have a society that focuses on solving those kinds of problems. We need a society that elevates knowledge and elevates intelligent people and not just rock stars and sports stars.
All I needed was like encouragement.
Yeah, I agree with Neil on this, and I think it's a solvable problem, and it's probably not harder than other problems that we've already solved in other domains. But what's needed is focus, and I applaud Aubrey de Grey's efforts to get society to focus more money and more research efforts on this sort of thing.
Okay, 1 second. Okay, yeah, I don't think you've asked a question yet. Yeah, you. You could speak up.
Yeah, this is sort of in the direction of the guy who's asking about the humanist thing. I started thinking, just corrected the whole panel up here. Do you see yourself as a nerd, an artist, a scientist, humanist? How do you see yourself?
Well, I'm definitely try to be a humanist. I think that's what my
Yeah, I think that I identify with all of those roles. I think it depends on what context we're in. But I think rather than see ourselves as some narrow identity, it helps to be able to see ourselves through lots of different lenses, depending on the context.
I generally see myself as a kind of monkey, you know? trying to get over the problem.
Yeah, go ahead.
Why don't you stand up.
Yeah.
Stand up so we can all hear.
I would say I see myself as a humanist monkey. And I have a question about how possible people might think, people like yourselves, that the same kind of reach of improvement of knowledge could happen with an enriched and facilitated population of the world, or population to start with in this country, let's say, and the same riches that artificial intelligence reaches for latent in the populations, depending on what happens in the world in terms of enriching the possibilities of that.
I think the moderator should repeat that question.
Yeah, well, so it's pretty vague. Could you sum up the question in one sentence?
Can artificial intelligence be parallel or even be replaced by a growth of the potential of people through the enrichment of people's experience in the world? And I'm not going to ask about how you...
Yeah, that's still really vague.
I'll take a shot.
Yeah.
So if I rephrase is, could the growth in AI be matched by a growth in human intelligence and engagement and knowledge? Is that sort of fair, sorry? Or take a stab at it. First of all, I'm a believer that, you know, when we finally have a machine that convincingly passes a Turing test on ordinary stuff, you know, we've had it pass in specialty things. The real lesson of the Turing test is we're going to discover just how many of our friends don't pass the Turing test. The other thing I would wrap around the context of your question, this is, as a technology forecaster, what I really am is a historian of technology who I happen to look mostly at technologies that don't exist. But the historic context is any new technology, when it appears on the horizon, its promise is to deliver deeper understanding, world peace, and cure for the common cold. That we actually hate change. We think we like change, but we really hate change. We like reading about change. And we like seeing all the change around everything else, but really what we do is try to preserve the one thing we love dearly. And so to actually go through change, it's a little bit like a kid, you know, on the diving board and their friends say, jump, jump. And we do that collectively as a culture by saying, it's going to be great. So I would just be a little bit of caution around the assumption behind your question. I think personally inequities are going to increase, not close. We'll solve some old things, but then we're going to create bigger gaps. In fact, I'm actually something of a pessimist.
Yeah, my assumption is, my fundamental assumption is in the capacities of humanity.
Okay.
Okay,
Well,
okay, good. Well, we should continue this later. I suspect we're right at
One
the...
quick. I would just say I think it's worthwhile educating all of humanity and trying to lift their knowledge base as much as possible, but that's independent of the question of whether that would somehow parallel machine intelligence, and I tend to think it wouldn't. I think
it can.
at some point, machine intelligence will take off.
I think that the human brain architecture is fundamentally limiting compared to what will eventually be possible with artificial intelligences, and eventually may come quite rapidly after we achieve human-level AI. You may see a quite rapid exponential acceleration beyond what is possible within the confines of being human, which doesn't mean being human is bad aesthetically or morally, but in terms of intelligence, it's pretty clear we're going to seem very low down on the scale compared to what comes after us.
Okay, we got time for one more. Go ahead at the mic.
I had a question for Neil. Was intrigued in one of your last slides that you were talking about machine-to-machine communications, or between AIs. And I'm kind of recalling with traffic on the internet that voice ultimately came to be much less than 1%, that sort of machine-to-machine came to dominate there.
Right.
Be interested if you could expand on that a little bit more. What what drove you to say that, and do you have a sense for what those applications might look like?
Yes, I just think that there are a lot of examples where in telecommunications, in automated controls, in industry, in satellite-to-ground communications, there are lots of opportunities for machines to interact with other machines without humans in the loop, and to do that in a relatively safe way. And I think that kind of volume is going to increase tremendously.
Yeah, boy, just seconding what Neil said, and for those of you in the room who aren't geezers like us, once upon a time, most telecommunications traffic was people talking to people, and then it became so small, under 1%, that they could give the voice part away for free. And machine-to-machine communications is now so dominant that, let's face it, I mean, we are all a little bit, while we're waiting for things to get intelligent, we become extraordinarily dependent on our machines. I mean, at moments I feel a little bit like Blanche Dubois in Streetcar Named Desire. I have always relied upon the kindness of strangers. And, little do I know that the kindness of strangers, I'm just trying to get some gas, and the Galaxy 5 satellite kicks out. And I didn't even think about the machine that was sending the data from the gas pump up to my credit card company until the machine collapsed. I'll offer you one forecast as penance for ducking the question earlier. What happened with telecommunications, voice being less than 1%, is happening to web pages. And within 15 years, less than 1% of all web pages in existence will be viewed by humans. It'll all be machines doing the reading.
Wow.
Well, the ability of machines to communicate with each other very effectively is one advantage they will have over humans, among their many other advantages in terms of cognitive architecture and rationality, because we can't really transmit thoughts to each other very effectively unless there's telepaths in the room. We have to download our thoughts into these annoying sequences of sound or text and so forth, whereas AI systems, if they're architected for it, can exchange information between each other in a much more rich and thorough way. And this is one of the things that's going to help them develop a much greater and richer experience than is possible within the human architecture.
Great. Okay, thanks everyone. Thanks guys.